The orientation hall on Prometheus 6 buzzed with the nervous energy of 23 species, trying not to accidentally offend each other while simultaneously wondering who among them would wash out first. Commander Holt stood at parade rest near the back wall, his weathered face sporting the kind of expression that suggested he'd seen this particular show before and found it mildly amusing. At the front of the chamber, Instructor Velnoth's scales rippled in what the xenobiology textbooks politely termed heightened emotional display. But what anyone with eyes could see was barely contained excitement. The Saurian had been waiting months to deliver this particular lecture, and his forked tongue flicked out repeatedly, a sure sign he was savoring the moment like a fine wine. "Cadets," Velnoth began, his voice carrying that peculiar hiss that made every word sound vaguely threatening. "Today we discuss apex predator survival training. This is not, I repeat, not a simulation you can respawn from if you make a mistake." Cadet Nexus, her compound eyes reflecting the chamber's harsh fluorescent lighting like twin disco balls, shifted nervously in her reinforced chair. The Chitaran's antennae twitched with what her species manual described as acute situational awareness, but looked suspiciously like the insect equivalent of breaking out in a cold sweat. "Sir?" she clicked, her translator converting her natural chittering into standard galactic. "When you say apex predator, are we talking about the theoretical maximum threat level? Or—" "Oh, we're talking about the real deal, Cadet." Velnoth's grin revealed rows of serrated teeth that had evolved specifically for tearing through armored prey. "Let me paint you a picture. The Void Stalkers of Kepler 442, 12 feet tall, adaptive camouflage that can match any surface down to the molecular level, and claws that can slice through durasteel like it's tissue paper. They hunt in coordinated packs of up to 30 individuals. The crystalline formations on Dorak's shoulders dimmed noticeably, a Lumerian stress response that was about as subtle as a fire alarm. His species had evolved in cave systems where the biggest threat was occasionally bumping into a wall in the dark, so the concept of something actively hunting them was roughly equivalent to explaining quantum physics to a houseplant. "Then," Velnoth continued, clearly warming to his theme, "we have the shadow wraiths of the nebula rings. Phase shift capability, telepathic pack coordination, and a hunting strategy that involves herding prey into kill zones over the course of several days. They've been known to follow a single target for weeks, learning its patterns, its weaknesses, its fears." Cadet Finn, who had been leaning back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone who clearly hadn't been paying attention, suddenly perked up. "Wait, they hunt in packs? For fun?" The entire chamber fell silent. Velnoth's head tilted at an angle that suggested his neck vertebrae had more flexibility than most species' entire spinal columns. "For fun?" The Saurian's translator seemed to struggle with the concept. "Cadet, these are apex predators. They hunt to survive, to feed, to establish territorial dominance. There is nothing recreational about—" "Oh, right, sure," Finn said, waving a hand dismissively. "It's just that, Grizzlies do that for fun back on Earth. The hunting in packs thing, I mean. Well, not packs exactly, but they definitely hunt for sport sometimes. My cousin Eddie saw one catch a fish, take a single bite, then toss it back in the river and catch another one. Just because it could." The silence that followed was the kind of profound quiet usually reserved for moments of deep spiritual contemplation or the split second before a supernova destroys an entire solar system. Nexus's antennae had gone completely still, which in Chitaran body language was roughly equivalent to someone's jaw dropping to the floor. Dorak's crystalline structure had shifted to a deep purple hue that the color charts diplomatically labeled existential confusion. "You're telling me," Velnoth said slowly, his words carrying the careful precision of someone trying very hard not to misunderstand something important, "that on your home world, apex predators hunt for entertainment?" Finn shrugged. "I mean, yeah? They're pretty smart, you know. When they're not hungry, they'll mess with smaller animals just to see what happens. There's this video feed from Yellowstone where a grizzly spent like 20 minutes batting around a ground squirrel. Not trying to eat it, just, you know, curious." "And the ground squirrel?" Dorak's voice had taken on the hollow quality of someone whose worldview was rapidly crumbling. "Oh, it was fine. Bears have pretty good paw control when they want to. The squirrel was probably just really confused, and maybe a little dizzy." Commander Holt made a sound that might have been a cough, but sounded suspiciously like suppressed laughter. When several pairs of alien eyes turned his way, he cleared his throat and adopted an expression of perfect military neutrality. Velnoth's scales had shifted to a color that wasn't in any of the standard xenobiology reference guides, which was probably because no one had ever needed a term for instructor having an existential crisis about curriculum relevance. "Cadet Finn," the Saurian said carefully, "are you suggesting that Earth's apex predators are playful?" "Well, not all of them. Tigers are pretty serious about their hunting, but yeah, a lot of them mess around when they're bored, polar bears especially. There's this research station up north where a bear figured out that if it breathed on the windows, it would fog them up, and then it could draw patterns with its nose. Kept coming back every day for like 2 weeks, just making different designs." The alien cadets exchanged glances that could have powered a small city with their sheer intensity of concern. "And these polar bears," Nexus clicked hesitantly. "They are larger than the grizzlies you mentioned?" "Oh yeah, way bigger. Adult males can hit 1,200 pounds easy, but they're actually pretty chill most of the time. Unless you get between a mom and her cubs, then you're gonna have a bad day real quick." Dorak's crystalline formations were now cycling through colors at a rate that would have triggered seizure warnings in most species. 1,200 pounds? And they are chill? Relatively speaking. Finn's tone was the casual confidence of someone discussing the weather rather than massive carnivorous mammals. "I mean, they can outrun a horse and swim for like 60 miles without stopping, but mostly they just want to eat seals and take naps. My aunt works for the Wildlife Service up in Alaska. Says the biggest problem with polar bears is that they're too curious. They'll investigate anything new in their territory, and that includes research stations, supply depots, and occasionally very surprised scientists." Velnoth's forked tongue had been flicking in and out so rapidly it was starting to blur. "And humans coexist with these creatures?" "Sure. We've got protocols for it. Make noise when you're hiking so you don't surprise them. Carry bear spray in case they get too interested. Hang your food up high when you're camping. Basic stuff." The phrase "basic stuff" seemed to hit the assembled alien cadets like a physical force. Several species made sounds that their translators couldn't process, which resulted in a cacophony of electronic beeping and error messages. "Bear spray?" Bram asked from the instructor's section, his avian head cocking at an angle that suggested his neck joints worked on entirely different principles than mammalian anatomy. "Chemical deterrent. Basically, concentrated pepper extract in an aerosol delivery system. Range of about 20 feet. Stops most bears cold. Though you've got to be careful with the wind direction, or you'll end up blinding yourself instead of the bear." Most bears? The question came from Kess, whose aquatic physiology meant she was perpetually concerned about chemical contamination. Well, some of them are just stubborn, or really hungry, or having a bad day. Bears are individuals, you know. They've got personalities. Some of them are pretty laid back. Others are just natural troublemakers. Commander Holt finally stepped forward, probably because several of the alien instructors looked like they were about to pass out from shock. What Cadet Finn is trying to say is that humans have adapted to sharing territory with large predators. It's shaped our recreational activities and survival instincts in ways that might seem unusual to species that evolved different environmental pressures. Recreational activities? Velnoth's voice had climbed to a pitch that suggested his vocal cords were under significant stress. Finn brightened. Oh yeah, tons of people go camping in bear country for vacation. Hiking, fishing, hunting, photography. There's this thing called bear watching, where you pay money to sit in a spot where bears hang out and just watch them do bear things. It's pretty popular. The silence returned, somehow even more profound than before. It was the kind of quiet that suggested the universe itself was taking a moment to process information that fundamentally challenged its understanding of how evolution was supposed to work. Finally, Cadet Joren, whose gaseous physiology meant he communicated through controlled electromagnetic pulses, managed to form a coherent thought. Humans pay currency to voluntarily place themselves in proximity to apex predators. For pleasure? Tourism industries worth billions, Finn confirmed cheerfully. Alaska, Montana, Canadian Rockies, Scandinavia, anywhere you've got big predators, you've got people who want to see them up close. Safely, of course. Usually. The usually seemed to be the detail that finally broke several alien minds completely. Nexus made a sound like a modem connecting to dial-up internet. Dorak's color cycling had accelerated to the point where he looked like a living kaleidoscope, and Velnoth appeared to be reconsidering every career choice that had led him to this moment. Commander Holt checked his chronometer with the practiced ease of someone who had timed this revelation perfectly. I think that's enough cultural exchange for one orientation session. Tomorrow, we'll be conducting practical exercises in apex predator encounter scenarios. Dismissed. As the cadets filed out, their conversations a mixture of concerned chittering, electronic beeping, and what sounded like philosophical debates about the nature of evolutionary sanity, Finn lingered behind. "Hey, Commander," he said. "Should I mention the thing about sharks?" Holt's expression remained perfectly neutral. "Let's save that for next week, Cadet. I think we've traumatized enough species for one day." Outside in the corridor, the alien cadets were already forming study groups, their voices carrying the urgent tone of beings who suddenly realized their survival training might be woefully inadequate for dealing with the casual insanity of human recreational activities. The real education, it seemed, was just getting started. The next morning's briefing room had the atmosphere of a funeral, where no one could agree on who had died. Instructor Velnoth stood at the holographic display unit, his scales cycling through colors that suggested he'd spent most of the night researching Earth's wildlife database and regretting every life choice that had led him to this moment. "I have reviewed the claims made yesterday," he announced, his voice carrying the weary tone of someone who'd discovered that reality had a twisted sense of humor. "And I must conclude that Cadet Finn was exaggerating." Finn, who was cheerfully munching on what appeared to be pressed fruit and grain. Humans, it seemed, would eat anything, looked up with genuine confusion. About what? The recreational interaction with apex predators, the voluntary proximity tourism, The casual coexistence protocols. Velnoth's tongue flicked out rapidly. Surely these were examples of human hyperbole designed to enhance your species' reputation for, what do you call it? Toughness. Before Finn could respond, the briefing room door hissed open, and Commander Holt strode in, followed by Lieutenant Cora and Cadet Tam. The humans moved with the easy confidence of people who had absolutely no idea they were about to shatter several alien worldviews beyond repair. "Morning, everyone," Holt said, settling into his chair with practiced military efficiency. "I trust Instructor Velnoth has been preparing you for today's practical exercises." "Actually, Commander," Velnoth said, his head tilting at that peculiar reptilian angle that suggested intense focus, "I was hoping you could clarify some of Cadet Finn's more creative descriptions of human-predator interactions." Holt glanced at Finn, who shrugged and held up his breakfast bar. "I just mentioned the bear thing." "Ah." Commander Holt nodded with the understanding of someone who'd been through this conversation before. "Well, what did you want to know?" "The claim that humans engage in recreational activities in territories occupied by apex predators," Velnoth said carefully, as if he were handling explosives with his vocal cords. "Oh, that's completely accurate," Lieutenant Cora interjected, her tone bright and helpful. "I actually run wilderness survival courses for civilian recreation groups. Last month, I had a family from New Jakarta who wanted to go camping in Glacier National Park, specifically because they'd heard about the grizzly population density." The silence that followed was so complete that the room's environmental systems became audible. A soft hum that seemed to emphasize just how thoroughly the alien minds were processing this information. "They wanted to camp where the bears live." Nexus clicked, her translator struggling with the concept. "Well, not right on top of them," Cora laughed. "We maintain safe distances and follow established protocols. But yeah, the wildlife viewing opportunities are a major draw for ecotourism. People come from all over the galaxy to see Earth's megafauna in their natural habitats." Cadet Tam, who had been quietly assembling what looked like a small mountain of outdoor gear, looked up from his equipment check. "I'm actually heading to Nepal next leave cycle. Gonna try to summit Everest via the North Face. Should be fun. Apparently, there's been increased snow leopard activity in that region this season." Dorak's crystalline structure had gone completely transparent, which in Lumerian physiology indicated either deep meditation or complete system overload. "You are climbing a mountain where apex predators hunt?" "Snow leopards aren't really a threat to climbers," Tam said dismissively. "They're pretty shy, and they stick to lower altitudes mostly. The real danger is the altitude, weather, and terrain. Plus, avalanches, crevasses, equipment failure, oxygen deprivation, the usual mountain stuff." "The usual mountain stuff." Joren's electromagnetic pulses had taken on a frequency that suggested his energy matrix was experiencing some kind of existential feedback loop. "Sure," Tam continued, obliviously cheerful. "Though I did have a buddy who encountered a brown bear while free climbing in Alaska. Turned out the bear was just curious about his gear setup. They ended up sharing a ledge for about 20 minutes while the bear investigated his ropes." Sharing a ledge. Velnoth's scales had shifted to a color that wasn't in any known xenobiology database, possibly because no one had ever needed a term for instructor contemplating career change. Commander Holt cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should mention the marine recreation activities as well." "Oh, right," Finn perked up. "Shark diving. That's super popular. You get in a cage, and they lower you down where the great whites are feeding. Some of the more extreme operators do cage-free diving, but that requires special certification. Cage-free, Kess repeated, her aquatic physiology allowing her to appreciate the full horror of that concept in ways the land-based species couldn't quite grasp. You enter the water, without barriers, with apex marine predators. The sharks aren't usually aggressive toward humans, Cora explained helpfully. Most attacks are cases of mistaken identity. They think we're seals or something. Once they realize we're not their normal prey, they typically lose interest. Typically? The word came from several alien throats simultaneously, creating a harmony of species-specific distress calls. Well, there are exceptions, Lieutenant Cora admitted. Bulls and tigers can be unpredictable, and if there's a feeding frenzy happening, you definitely want to keep your distance. But the statistics are pretty favorable. You're more likely to be struck by lightning than attacked by a shark. And yet, humans willingly enter their environment, Instructor Bram observed, his avian head cocking at an angle that suggested he was trying to process information that fundamentally challenged his understanding of survival instincts. "Oh, that's nothing compared to the extreme sports crowd," Tam said, warming to the topic. Base jumping, wingsuit flying, free solo climbing, volcano boarding. Humans will turn literally anything into a recreational activity if you give them enough time and imagination. Volcano boarding? Dorak managed to ask, his crystalline structure flickering like a damaged light display. You strap a reinforced board to your feet and ride down the side of an active volcano. The volcanic ash creates this really unique surface texture that allows for some pretty incredible speeds. I hit 83 miles per hour on Cerro Negro last year. The alien cadets had begun making sounds that their translators were interpreting as various forms of mechanical failure, which probably wasn't far from the truth given the circumstances. But surely, Velnoth said, his voice carrying the desperate hope of someone clinging to the last fragments of a rational universe. These are isolated examples, extreme outliers, not representative of typical human behavior. Actually, Commander Holt said, consulting a data pad with the casual efficiency of someone delivering a routine status report, adventure tourism is one of Earth's fastest-growing economic sectors. Last year alone, we had over 200 million participants in what we classify as high-risk recreational activities. 200 million. Nexus's antennae had gone completely limp, which was the Chitaran equivalent of fainting while still technically conscious. And that's just the registered activities, Tam added cheerfully. Doesn't include the informal stuff, weekend hiking in predator territories, amateur wildlife photography, recreational fishing in areas with known crocodilian populations. Crocodilians? Kess's question carried the tone of someone who really didn't want to know the answer, but couldn't stop herself from asking. Think of them as armored, semi-aquatic ambush predators with a bite force that can crush titanium alloy, Cora explained. They're actually quite fascinating from a behavioral standpoint. Very patient hunters, extremely territorial, and they can hold their breath for over an hour while waiting for prey to come within striking range. And humans fish? In their territory? Dorak's question sounded like it was being transmitted through several layers of existential static. Sport fishing for species that share habitat with crocodilians is pretty popular, Finn confirmed. You've got to be smart about it. Use proper boats, maintain safe distances, don't trail your hands in the water. But the fishing is usually fantastic because the ecosystem balance tends to be really healthy in predator-rich environments. Velnoth had begun pacing, which in Saurian body language indicated either deep thought or the early stages of a nervous breakdown. Let me ensure I understand this correctly. Humans voluntarily place themselves in environments occupied by creatures that could easily kill them, for the purpose of enjoyment? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds kind of crazy, Tam laughed. But that's the point, isn't it? The challenge, the adrenaline, the sense of accomplishment when you successfully navigate a dangerous situation through skill and preparation. Besides, Lieutenant Cora added, most of these activities are much safer than they appear if you follow proper protocols and use appropriate equipment. The fatality rates are actually quite low when you account for participation numbers. Most, Instructor Bram repeated, focusing on what was apparently the most terrifying word in that sentence. There are always going to be accidents, Holt said with military matter-of-factness. Equipment failure, weather emergencies, human error, unexpected animal behavior. But that's true of any activity, really. More humans die from falling down stairs than from animal attacks. Yet they continue to seek out the animal encounters, Velnoth observed, his scales now cycling through what appeared to be the entire visible spectrum, plus a few colors that shouldn't technically exist. That's what makes it fun, Finn said, as if explaining something obvious to particularly slow children. If there wasn't any risk, it wouldn't be challenging. And if it's not challenging, what's the point? The alien instructors exchanged glances that could have powered a starship with their sheer intensity of concerned bewilderment. I think, Velnoth said slowly, that we need to modify today's training exercise. Oh, Commander Holt's tone carried the careful neutrality of someone who suspected they were about to enjoy themselves immensely. Yes, instead of the standard apex predator survival scenarios, I propose we test these claims directly. A practical demonstration of human survival techniques in predator-occupied territory. Sounds reasonable, Holt agreed. What parameters did you have in mind? Full holographic simulation, multiple predator species, varied terrain and environmental conditions. Teams of mixed species composition. Velnoth's tongue flicked out rapidly. And Earth standard difficulty levels. The alien cadets made sounds that suggested they were beginning to suspect they'd been maneuvered into something that would end badly for everyone involved. Earth standard, Commander Holt repeated thoughtfully. Well, that should be interesting. What do you think, cadets? Ready to show our galactic friends how humans handle a weekend camping trip? Finn grinned. Can we bring s'mores supplies? The fact that no one knew what s'mores were somehow made everything infinitely more terrifying. The holographic training chamber hummed to life with the kind of sophisticated technology that could recreate entire ecosystems down to the molecular level. What it had created this morning was, according to the technical specifications, a multi-biome apex predator survival scenario with Earth-standard environmental parameters and threat assessment protocols. What it looked like was the kind of wilderness that would make seasoned outdoors enthusiasts pause to check their insurance policies. Teams will be deployed at random coordinates within the simulation, Instructor Velnoth announced, his voice carrying over the intercom with the enthusiasm of someone who believed he was about to prove a very important point about galactic survival priorities. Objective is simple. Survive until extraction, while demonstrating proper apex predator encounter protocols. The alien cadets stood in formation, wearing enough advanced military hardware to outfit a small invasion force. Nexus had strapped on a portable sensor array that could detect heartbeats from 3 kilometers away, emergency beacon transmitters, environmental protection barriers, and what appeared to be a small artillery piece disguised as a backpack. Dorak's crystalline structure was encased in adaptive armor that shifted colors to match his surroundings, complete with energy shield generators, tactical analysis computers, and enough emergency rations to survive a siege. His equipment weighed more than most small vehicles. Kes had modified her aquatic mobility suit to include sonar mapping, chemical analysis systems, and defensive weaponry that could theoretically stop a charging spacecraft. The fact that she was preparing for a nature walk with the same gear most species reserved for interstellar warfare seemed completely reasonable to everyone involved. Everyone except the humans, who looked like they were heading out for a pleasant weekend hike. Finn had a basic backpack, a water bottle, some kind of preserved food bars, and a small canister that he'd labeled bear spray. Tam carried similar gear, plus what appeared to be a compact shelter and a device for starting fires. Lieutenant Cora had added a first aid kit and some kind of reference guide to local flora. The contrast was so stark that it looked like a comparison between two entirely different concepts of what survival preparation meant. Deployment commences in 30 seconds, Belnoth announced. Remember, these are apex predators. They have evolved specifically to hunt and kill. Treat them with the respect and caution they deserve. Got it, Finn called back cheerfully. Don't feed the bears. Keep food stored properly. Make noise on the trail. Standard camping stuff. The fact that he referred to advanced military survival training as standard camping stuff caused several alien translators to emit warning beeps, suggesting they were struggling to process concepts that didn't fit their programmed parameters. Transport beams engaged, and suddenly the cadets found themselves scattered across a vast wilderness that looked like Earth's most beautiful and deadly environments had been combined by someone with a very sophisticated understanding of how to create scenic terror. Team Alpha, Nexus, Dorak, and Kes materialized in what appeared to be a crystalline cave system that opened onto a misty forest glade. The environment was gorgeous in the way that suggested it was definitely going to try to kill them. Sensor sweep indicates multiple large life forms within detection range, Nexus reported, her equipment painting holographic threat assessments across her visual display. Estimated mass, 800 to 1,200 kilograms. Heat signatures suggest mammalian physiology. Predator behavioral patterns confirmed. Defensive perimeter established, Dorak announced, his armor's chameleon systems making him blend seamlessly with the cave wall. Energy barriers online. Tactical analysis suggests elevated terrain advantage for observation and defensive positioning. Aquatic escape routes mapped, Kes added, her sonar having located an underground stream system. Emergency extraction protocols ready for implementation. They had transformed a nature hike into a military operation with the efficiency of species that had never learned to coexist with anything larger than themselves. Meanwhile, Team Beta, the humans, had been deposited in what looked like a postcard-perfect mountain meadow surrounded by dense forest. Birds were singing, a stream bubbled nearby, and the afternoon sun painted everything in golden light that belonged in tourism advertisements. Nice spot, Tam observed, stretching and breathing deeply. Good water source, decent sight lines, plenty of deadfall for firewood if we end up camping overnight. Weather looks stable, Lieutenant Cora agreed, checking the sky with the practiced eye of someone who'd learned to read atmospheric conditions the hard way. Though we should keep an eye on those clouds to the west. Could be a front moving in. Finn was examining the ground with the casual interest of someone reading a particularly engaging book. Lots of game trails through here. Looks like deer, maybe elk, some larger prints. Could be bear, but they're a few days old. They were treating a military survival exercise like a weekend nature walk, because from their perspective, that's exactly what it was. The first encounter happened 18 minutes into the simulation. Team Alpha's sensor arrays lit up like festival displays as something massive moved through the forest toward their position. Emergency protocols activated automatically, sealing them behind energy barriers and painting targeting solutions across their visual displays. "Contact confirmed," Nexus reported, her voice tight with combat readiness. "Single entity, approaching from bearing 210. Mass approximately 1,000 kilograms. Predator movement patterns suggest active hunting behavior." Through the mist came something that looked like it had been designed by a committee of nightmares and death metal album covers. 12 feet of muscle and claws, with adaptive camouflage that shifted to match the environment, and eyes that reflected available light, like biological targeting systems. It was, according to the simulation parameters, a void stalker of Kepler 442, one of the most feared apex predators in known space. "Engaging defensive protocols," Dorak announced, his weapon systems humming to life with the sound of civilization preparing to hold the line against the savage wild. "Aquatic retreat route confirmed ready," Kess added, her mobility systems primed for rapid extraction to the underground stream. The creature circled their position with the patient intelligence of something that had never encountered prey capable of fighting back effectively. It probed their defenses, tested their response times, and generally behaved like the apex predator it was supposed to be. The engagement lasted 43 minutes of careful maneuvering, tactical repositioning, coordinated defensive fire, and enough military precision to impress a staff college. When the creature finally withdrew, the alien cadets were exhausted but triumphant, having successfully demonstrated textbook survival protocols against a superior predator. They had no way of knowing that their void stalker was actually a holographic representation of a completely ordinary grizzly bear that had been programmed to look scary. Team Beta's first encounter was considerably more anticlimactic. "Oh, hey there, buddy," Finn said conversationally, as a large brown shape emerged from the tree line about 50 meters away. "Beautiful day for a walk, isn't it?" The bear, because it was quite obviously a bear, despite the holographic system's attempt to make it look alien and terrifying, paused and sat down, apparently as surprised to see humans as they were to see it. "That's a big one," Tam observed with genuine appreciation. "Probably a male, maybe 600 pounds. Good condition, nice coat. Looks healthy." Lieutenant Cora had quietly moved to put a large tree between herself and the bear, not out of panic, but from the kind of practiced caution that comes from actually encountering these animals in the wild. "Everyone stay calm, speak in normal tones, don't make sudden movements. He's just curious." "Should we make noise?" Finn asked, his voice carrying the tone of someone discussing dinner plans, rather than apex predator encounter protocols. "He knows we're here," Cora replied. "If he wanted to avoid us, he would have. Since he's sticking around, he's probably trying to figure out what we are." The bear tilted its head, made a sound that was somewhere between a huff and a sigh, then stood up and wandered back into the forest, with the casual indifference of someone who had determined that these particular humans weren't interesting enough to warrant further investigation. "Well, that was fun," Tam said cheerfully. "Anyone want to set up camp by the stream? I brought coffee." The entire encounter had lasted less than 5 minutes and had been resolved through what the humans considered basic wilderness etiquette, mutual respect, appropriate caution, and the understanding that most wild animals have better things to do than bother with humans who aren't acting like prey. Back at the monitoring station, Velnoth watched both encounters with the expression of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality was undergoing rapid and uncomfortable revision. "Run it again," he said to the technician, "and this time, make sure the threat parameters are calibrated correctly." The technician, A nervous Lumerian, whose crystalline structure was flickering with uncertainty, checked his readings twice. "Sir, the parameters are exactly as specified. Earth-standard apex predator encounters, realistic behavioral patterns, authentic environmental conditions." "Then why," Velnoth asked through gritted teeth, "are the humans treating it like a recreational nature walk?" "Because," Commander Holt said from behind him, his tone carrying the patient amusement of someone who had been waiting for exactly this question. "That's exactly what it is." The revelation that would shatter everything they thought they knew about Earth's wildlife was still 3 encounters away. The debriefing chamber felt like the aftermath of 2 completely different wars. Team Alpha sat slumped in their chairs, their advanced equipment powered down, and their faces carrying the hollow-eyed exhaustion of soldiers who had stared death in the face and lived to tell about it. Their gear was scattered around them like the remnants of a high-tech battlefield. Team Beta looked like they'd just returned from a pleasant nature documentary shoot. Finn was sharing trail mix with Tam. Lieutenant Cora was updating her field notes, and all 3 humans had the relaxed demeanor of people who'd spent a lovely afternoon outdoors. "Report," Velnoth commanded, his scales cycling through colors that suggested he was either deeply confused or having some kind of nervous breakdown. Possibly both. Nexus straightened with visible effort. "Multiple apex predator encounters, sir. Void stalkers, shadow wraiths, and what appeared to be a pack of cave stalkers. Full defensive protocols were required. Energy barriers held, but barely. Without our advanced equipment, survival would have been unlikely." 43 minutes of sustained tactical engagement with the primary threat, Dorak added, his crystalline structure still dim from exhaustion. Coordinated pack behavior, adaptive hunting strategies, persistent territorial challenges. Textbook apex predator behavioral patterns. Kess nodded wearily. Aquatic escape routes were necessary twice. The creatures demonstrated problem-solving capabilities and environmental adaptation that exceeded our initial threat assessments. Velnoth's head swiveled toward the humans with the mechanical precision of a targeting system. "And Team Beta's experience?" "Oh, we saw some bears," Finn said cheerfully. "Nice ones. There was this one mom with 2 cubs who came down to the stream while we were filtering water. Kept her distance, taught the little ones how to fish. Pretty educational, actually." The silence that followed was the kind of profound quiet usually reserved for moments when the universe pauses to reconsider its basic operating principles. "Bears," Velnoth repeated slowly. "Black bears, mostly," Lieutenant Cora clarified helpfully. "One grizzly, but he wasn't interested in us. Probably heading to a salmon run upstream. We also spotted some elk, a few deer, and I think there was a mountain lion watching us from that ridge around midday, but it moved on." "Mountain lion," Instructor Bram repeated, his avian head tilting to an angle that suggested his neck had more joints than most species' entire spinal columns. "Cougar, puma, whatever you want to call them," Tam said with a shrug. "Beautiful animals. This one was probably just curious about our gear. They're pretty shy around humans unless they're protecting cubs or territory." Commander Holt stepped forward, and something in his expression suggested the universe was about to become a much more interesting and terrifying place. "Instructor Velnoth," he said with military formality, "I need to inform you of a slight modification we made to the simulation parameters." Velnoth's scales went completely still, which in Saurian physiology indicated either deep meditation or the biological equivalent of a system crash. "What kind of modification?" "We ran the entire exercise using Earth's actual wildlife database instead of the standard galactic apex predator catalog." The chamber fell so silent that the environmental systems became audible. Somewhere in that silence, several alien worldviews quietly imploded. "You're telling me?" Nexus clicked slowly, her translator struggling with concepts that fundamentally challenged her understanding of evolutionary sanity. "That we just spent the day fighting Earth animals?" "Your Void Stalker was a grizzly bear," Holt confirmed. "The Shadow Wraiths were a wolf pack. The Cave Stalkers were mountain lions." Dorak's crystalline structure began cycling through colors at a rate that would have triggered seizure warnings in most species. "We deployed full military protocols against bears?" "And wolves," Lieutenant Cora added helpfully. "Though technically, wolf attacks on humans are extremely rare. Most of the time, they avoid us completely." "The creature that required 43 minutes of coordinated tactical response," Velnoth said, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone whose professional expertise had just been revealed as cosmic joke, "was a bear." "A pretty standard one, too," Finn observed. "Maybe a little curious, but nothing unusual." "They're actually quite intelligent. Problem solvers, you know? That's why your sensors read it as having adaptive hunting strategies." Tam grinned. "You should see what happens when they figure out how to open car doors. There's this campground in Yosemite, where they've learned to pop trunk locks with their claws. Rangers have to use special bear-proof containers for everything now." The alien cadets exchanged glances that could have powered a small city with their sheer intensity of existential horror. "Let me ensure I understand this correctly," Instructor Bram said carefully. "Humans coexist with creatures that require military-grade equipment and coordinated tactical responses to survive encounters with." "Well, no," Commander Holt said, and his smile suggested he was about to make everything infinitely worse. "That's not the real lesson here." "Then, what is?" Velnoth asked, though his tone suggested he really didn't want to know the answer. "The real lesson is about adaptation and perspective. You developed technology to avoid your apex predators. We developed behavioral strategies to coexist with ours. Neither approach is wrong. They're just different solutions to different evolutionary pressures." "But you voluntarily seek out encounters with them," Dorak protested, his structure flickering like a damaged display. "Because they're not encounters to us," Lieutenant Cora explained. "They're neighbors. We've been sharing territory with these animals for hundreds of thousands of years. We learned their behavioral patterns, they learned ours, and we figured out how to coexist." Finn stood up, dusting off his hands. "Besides, if you think bears are impressive, wait until you hear about Australian wildlife. Or better yet, the deep ocean stuff. Giant squids, great whites, blue-ringed octopi." "Please stop," Velnoth said weakly. "Oh, and then there's the extreme sports crowd," Tam added with enthusiasm. "Base jumping, free climbing, volcano surfing." "I said please stop." Commander Holt checked his chronometer. "I think that's enough cultural exchange for today. Tomorrow, we'll discuss human recreational activities in more detail, including something called wingsuit proximity flying, and why humans consider it relaxing." As the alien cadets filed out, their conversations a mixture of species-specific distress calls and what sounded like group therapy sessions, Velnoth lingered behind. "Commander," he said quietly, "are all human recreational activities this traumatic to observe?" Holt considered this seriously. "Well, we haven't gotten to the part about motorcycle racing or competitive eating yet." Velnoth's scales shifted to a color that wasn't in any known database, probably because no one had ever needed a term for instructor contemplating early retirement due to existential terror. Outside in the corridor, The sound of alien cadets having what could charitably be called learning experiences echoed through the station. Nexus was explaining to a group of Chitarans that humans regularly went camping in territories where creatures lived that could tear through military-grade armor. Dorak had gathered a cluster of Lumerians around a holographic display, showing them footage of something called bear-watching tours, where humans paid money to sit in small boats near fishing bears. Kes appeared to be having a breakdown over the concept of swimming with sharks, her aquatic physiology allowing her to fully comprehend the insanity of voluntarily entering the water with apex marine predators. The statistical analysis doesn't compute, she was saying to anyone who would listen. They acknowledge the danger, prepare for the danger, then seek out the danger for pleasure. Back in the briefing room, Finn had started pulling up footage on his personal device. "Oh, you guys want to see? Something really cool? This is from last year's cliff diving championship. The location is this place called Death's Door, off the coast of Australia." "No," Velnoth said firmly. "No, we do not want to see that. But it's really spectacular. The water's only about 40 feet deep, but there are bull sharks in the area, so divers have to time their entries perfectly to avoid." "Cadet Finn," Commander Holt interrupted gently, "I think you've traumatized enough species for one day." "Oh, right." Finn grinned sheepishly. "Sorry. Sometimes I forget that not everyone grew up thinking dodging wildlife was normal weekend entertainment." Velnoth made a sound that might have been laughter, or possibly the early stages of a nervous breakdown. "Cadet, I'm beginning to suspect that nothing about your species qualifies as normal by galactic standards." "That's what makes life interesting," Tam said cheerfully. The education of the galaxy about human recreational insanity had only just begun.